Hey guys, tonight we slip beneath a sky that smells of dust and iron, the kind that sticks to your lips and whispers of war drums beyond the horizon. You stand there, boots sinking into the cracked plain of Gaugamela, where the largest army ever assembled waits to swallow you whole. The heat sways the air like a curtain of ghosts. You blink, and the horizon moves. You blink again and realize it's not the horizon, it's soldiers. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds, the kind of numbers that make your stomach try to crawl up your throat. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love seeing our little constellation of night owls around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You can feel the tension of the world here. It hums under your skin, hummingbird fast. Alexander is somewhere to your left, helmet glinting like a coin flicked by the gods. His horse, Bucephalus, shifts its weight, stamping the soil as though impatient to rewrite destiny. There's something strange about him. The Macedonian king, barely 30 years old, surrounded by men who would die at a glance from him, yet smiling like a man about to perform a magic trick. Because, in a way, that's exactly what he's doing. The world thinks this is a battle. He thinks it's a stage. Darius III, the Persian king, has brought a monster of an army, possibly 200,000 men, though historians still argue whether those ancient chroniclers were exaggerating just to make Alexander look even cooler. Either way, it's an ocean of spears and dust. They say Darius's chariots were armed with scythes on their wheels, blades so sharp they could slice a man in half. You take one look at that glinting tide and think, yeah, maybe I should have stayed home to plant olives. But Alexander doesn't flinch. He studies the terrain, and you can practically hear the gears turning. He sees what others can't. The flatness of the field, perfect for those Persian chariots, isn't a problem. It's a puzzle. He has the answer tucked in that quiet grin. He rides forward, speaking softly to his men. His voice carries, calm as wind brushing wheat. You notice that he doesn't shout. That's the first trick. Commanders usually roar to sound brave, but Alexander's calm tone makes his troops lean in. When a man with an army of thousands whispers, it feels like a secret between friends. He knows something they don't yet. Victory starts in the mind. You shift your gaze across the line, and everything looks wrong. The Macedonian formation is angled slightly, like a door cracked open. It's deliberate. Alexander has placed his cavalry, his elite companion units, at a subtle tilt, inviting Darius to attack the open space on the right. It's bait, and the Persian king takes it like a fish spotting glitter in the water. Meanwhile, you hear rumors among the ranks. Someone swears that Alexander dreams in geometry, that before a battle he draws patterns in the sand, lines that later become troop formations. It sounds like a tavern myth, but looking around at the symmetry of the phalanx, you almost believe it. A scholar's mind hidden in a warrior's frame. The phalanx stands like a wall of bronze teeth. Each sarissa spear gleams 6 meters long, enough to impale a man before he can get close enough to smell your sweat. You hold your breath as Alexander gives a signal, a subtle flick of his wrist. The entire line moves like a single creature exhaling. And then it begins. The ground trembles as the Persian chariots charge, wheels shrieking like banshees. The sun flashes off their blades, and the wind whips their dust straight into your lungs. You brace for impact, but the Macedonian soldiers part like a curtain. Gaps open in the line, perfectly measured, just wide enough for the chariots to slip through. Javelins rain down from the flanks, cutting the drivers before they can blink. Horses panic, crash into each other, and turn the front line into a mess of metal and screams. You almost feel bad for Darius. Almost. Here's the funny part. Alexander planned it that way. He'd ordered his men to scatter spikes and dig shallow ditches disguised beneath dust, invisible traps that turned those fancy scythed chariots into death traps for their own drivers. A commander fighting like a street magician, distract with one hand, destroy with the other. There's a fringe tidbit you overhear from a camp rumor later that night. Someone claims Alexander consulted an Egyptian priest before the battle, asking which star sign would favor deception. Another insists he sacrificed a white rooster to Hermes, the trickster god. No one knows if it's true, but it fits his brand, a conqueror who conquers first in the mind. The dust thickens. The Persian line begins to buckle under its own size. Imagine trying to coordinate an army so big that your orders take half an hour just to reach the edges. It's like trying to steer an octopus with a single leash. And then, through the chaos, you spot Alexander again. He isn't where you expect him. He's drifting toward the right, his cavalry following in a curve. You realize he's not retreating. He's stretching the Persian line, pulling it like taffy until a gap opens near the center. You'd think Darius would see it, but fear and pride make poor advisors. The Persian king panics, orders a premature charge, and suddenly Alexander does the unthinkable. He pivots hard, aims straight for the heart of the enemy line, and sprints like lightning toward Darius himself. For a moment, the world holds its breath. You see Alexander's helmet gleam, a flash of gold amid the chaos. Then, the phalanx surges behind him, collapsing the gap and sealing Darius's fate. Later, chroniclers will write that Darius fled in terror, abandoning his royal chariot and even his family. Whether it's true or not, you can feel the shift. The moment fear changes sides. The battlefield quiets. The dust begins to fall like ash. Somewhere in the distance, a wounded horse limps, its reins dragging. You wipe your brow, tasting salt and grit, and think, this wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The genius wasn't in the blood, but in the silence before the storm. You look at Alexander one last time. He's dismounting, slow and deliberate, brushing dust off his armor as if the world hasn't just shifted on its axis. He looks around, eyes distant, already seeing another horizon to chase. And just like that, you understand. The real empire he's building isn't made of land. It's made of momentum. You wake the next morning to silence. No trumpets, no clashing bronze. Only the faint hiss of wind pushing through trampled grass. Gaugamela lies behind you now, a battlefield turned graveyard, but the air still hums with a strange energy, like a held breath that never got released. You think maybe it's the sound of history, realizing it just changed. Alexander walks among the wreckage without ceremony, scanning the horizon like he's searching for something invisible. You watch him pause, crouch, and draw a line in the dust with his finger. His soldiers say he does this after every great battle, maps the field from memory, correcting the gods on where they went wrong. You suspect it's more than habit. It's obsession. You follow the motion of his hand and see what he sees. Geometry. The entire battle was a kind of equation, a puzzle solved with precision so clean it feels inhuman. While others saw the Persian army as an avalanche, Alexander saw it as light refracting through glass. Manageable, if you just tilt the mirror right. And that's the secret he never says out loud. Victory isn't about strength, it's about perception. You remember how, just before the battle, he ordered his men to polish their shields to a mirror shine. At first, you thought it was vanity. He's 20-something and loves a good sparkle. But later, when the sun hit those shields at the perfect angle, blinding the Persian front line, you realize he was painting with light, creating illusions. Darius didn't lose to an army, he lost to a mirage. Historians still argue whether Alexander actually used mirrored armor for tactical glare, but the psychological warfare? That's undeniable. He made his soldiers look larger, faster, unstoppable, a moving trick of the desert. You step closer to where the Persian camp once stood. The tents are half collapsed, the luxury goods strewn across the sand, gold cups, perfumed oils, silk banners now tangled in thorn bushes. It's strange. This army of decadence fell not from lack of courage, but from disbelief. They couldn't imagine losing. That was Alexander's second illusion. Make the impossible seem casual.
A soldier next to you, an old veteran with missing teeth, laughs through the blood on his lip. He doesn't fight, the man mutters. He predicts. You nod, pretending to understand, but deep down, you do. Alexander doesn't see battles as battles. He sees them as stories, and he always writes the ending first. You walk through the aftermath, past broken chariots and scattered arrows. There's a strange beauty in the chaos, lines of symmetry hidden in destruction, like a shattered mosaic still clinging to its pattern. Someone jokes that the Macedonian army moves like a school of fish, turning in perfect unison. You imagine Alexander conducting them like an orchestra, each spear thrust a note in a song only he can hear. And yet, for all his precision, he's still unpredictable. Remember that oblique line maneuver? How he angled his entire formation just enough to bait Darius. It wasn't a one-off trick, it was philosophy. Make the enemy think they understand you, then change shape. That's the anatomy of a mirage, constant motion. There's a fringe story told by one of the Persian survivors, whispered over years of exile. They say Alexander appeared to glow during the final charge, not metaphorically, but literally, his armor radiating light as if he carried the sun on his shoulders. Maybe it was heat shimmer, maybe exaggeration, or maybe something else. The Persians had a word for that kind of divine brightness, huarna, the radiance of kingship. To them, he wasn't just a general, he was a cosmic event. You kneel and pick up a Persian helmet, still warm from the sun. It's beautifully made, embossed with lions and flowers. You turn it over and realize how heavy it is. You can almost feel the weight of empire pressing down through the metal. Alexander didn't just outfight Darius, he out-imagined him. The Persians relied on spectacle, banners, gold, elephants, scythed chariots. Alexander relied on something subtler, pattern recognition. He could look at a field and see probability. You watch him now, walking the perimeter, checking the fallen like a craftsman inspecting his work. When he stops beside a dying Persian officer, he orders his men to give the man water. That gesture feels offbeat, compassion in a sea of conquest. But it's another illusion. Mercy is power too. Make your enemies admire you, even as you destroy them. The old soldier beside you wipes his brow. He'll never stop, he mutters. He's chasing a ghost. You ask what ghost? The man shrugs. Whatever's always just beyond his map. That night in the Macedonian camp, you sit around the fire listening to the murmured gossip. Someone swears Alexander spoke with Darius's astrologer before the battle, learning the Persians' own prophecies. Another says he carries Aristotle's letters in his saddlebag, pulling them out like talismans before battle. You half expect someone to say he drinks ambrosia for breakfast. But the truth, you realize, is more mundane and more terrifying. He studies, he observes, he adapts. When dawn comes again, you see him sketching the next campaign route in the dirt, east, always east. Someone asks, why not stop? Why not enjoy the spoils? He just smiles and says, because the world doesn't end here. The soldiers cheer, half thrilled, half exhausted. You just stare at him, wondering if genius is really just a polite word for restlessness.
Somewhere in your mind, you replay the image of that battle, the shifting lines, the calculated chaos, the mirage that devoured an empire. You can almost hear Alexander whisper, "It's not the numbers that matter, it's the angles." And maybe that's the lesson, that in every fight, whether with swords or spreadsheets, the smartest move is to let the opponent think they're winning until you've already written their ending. The fire crackles low. Someone hums a Macedonian marching tune, slow and sad. You lie back on the hard earth, staring at the stars. You realize you're looking at the same constellations Alexander must be mapping in his mind, geometry written in light. And somewhere up there, you imagine Darius's ghost still running, chased by a man who turned the battlefield into a mirror. You follow Alexander eastward, where the air thickens with dust and legend. The Persians are broken, their king vanished, their empire now folded like a map into Alexander's pocket. Yet the march doesn't stop. It never stops. You'd think conquering the known world would buy a man a weekend off, but no, Alexander's genius is allergic to stillness. The road winds through Babylon, where ziggurats glow under torchlight like tiered suns, and you can taste incense and empire in the same breath. The city falls without a fight. In fact, they greet him like a messiah. Garlands on the streets, priests bowing low. You walk among the crowd, wondering how the same man who orchestrated slaughter now moves through adoration like it's another type of formation. He accepts offerings, frees captives, prays in strange temples, all with that same calm, surgical smile. Historians still argue whether this was diplomacy or performance. Some say he truly believed in uniting East and West. Others think he just wanted the optics of peace. You can't tell. The line between sincerity and strategy blurs the more you watch him. There's a quirky Babylonian tidbit the locals whisper. When Alexander entered the city, a tame lion supposedly escaped its cage and followed him through the gates, pacing beside Bucephalus, as if recognizing a kindred creature. The priests took it as an omen. The soldiers took it as a flex. You just tried to stay behind the lion. But there's something shifting in his tone now. Conquest has turned into cartography. He studies rivers, languages, even court customs, like a man decoding the human genome centuries early. At night, he hosts debates between his officers and Persian scholars, half philosophy, half drinking contest. You listen as they argue about the nature of leadership, the soul, and whether courage is learned or inherited. Alexander just smirks and says, "It's contagious." You realize he's not just building an empire, he's building a system. Each conquered city becomes a node in an invisible network. Roads, markets, marriages. He plants Greek colonies like data servers, transmitting his culture across the map. Coins with his face circulate faster than rumor. The world begins to think in Macedonian. And yet, there's tension. His men grumble about the foreign clothes he's wearing now, the Persian courtiers bowing too low, the way he's adopted Eastern etiquette. You overhear a soldier joke, "Next he'll be drinking tea instead of wine." Everyone laughs, but the air feels heavier. You realize assimilation is its own kind of battlefield. Still, Alexander never loses composure. He holds court surrounded by incense smoke and strange instruments. The walls glitter with blue-glazed lions, but his eyes are already somewhere else. India, maybe. The map stretches endlessly before him, and you can tell he's chasing more than land now. He's chasing understanding. That's where you begin to notice the geometry again. The symmetry not of tactics this time, but of governance. He reorganizes cities into grids, builds libraries, standardizes weights and measures. It's as if he wants the world to think in straight lines. The soldier becomes an architect, the conqueror a curator. You stand one evening beside the Euphrates as the sun sets orange over the water. Alexander approaches quietly, studying the river's reflection. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmurs. You nod. He tosses a pebble into the current. "Even beauty needs order," he adds, and walks away. You can't shake that sentence. You start seeing it everywhere. Order in the way markets are laid out, in how his officers record supplies, in how he teaches the locals Greek phrases alongside their own. He's coding a civilization in real time. But not everyone buys into the dream. His generals murmur dissent, accusing him of forgetting who he is. Macedonian simplicity is drowning under Persian gold. The army's patience thins. Some even plot mutiny. Yet Alexander always diffuses rebellion with performance. He throws lavish feasts, wrestles with his soldiers, and tells stories so vivid they forget why they were angry. One night in Susa, he stages a mass wedding between his officers and Persian noblewomen, a living symbol of fusion. You're there among the torches, watching him marry Roxana, the Bactrian princess, with quiet grace. The scent of rosewater fills the air. For a moment, even the skeptics are silent. Then the wine flows and history softens around the edges. There's a curious superstition among the attendants that Alexander keeps a strand of Achilles' hair in his cloak, as if drawing courage from the dead. Whether true or not, it fits his image perfectly, half myth, half man. And still, the march continues, into deserts where the horizon looks like melted glass, across rivers that swallow horses whole, through mountains that hum at night. The army grows thinner, quieter, more ghost than force. You begin to realize that his greatest enemy is no longer Persia, but time itself. In a strange way, you envy him, not for the glory, but for the clarity. Every step he takes, every city he claims, it's all part of a pattern too vast to see from where you stand. You suspect he doesn't even know where it leads. He just trusts the geometry. As you drift off by the campfire, you remember his words at Gaugamela. It's not the numbers that matter. It's the angles. Now, as empire replaces battlefield, you understand. The same principle applies to power. Control the angles, political, social, cultural, and the numbers follow. You fall asleep to the rhythmic clang of hammers building yet another fortress, another node in the endless network of Alexander's will. Somewhere beyond the dark, elephants trumpet faintly, the next horizon calling. You leave the heat of Babylon behind and drift forward through time, centuries collapsing like tents after a long campaign. The dust clears, the horses change, and the language shifts, but the rhythm of conquest remains. Now the wind smells of steppe grass and smoke. The air hums with a different kind of stillness, the Mongol kind, where silence isn't peace, it's potential energy. You're standing in a camp of felt tents that glitter faintly under moonlight. The stars hang low, so clear you feel you could pluck one down and stir it into a cup. There's no gold here, no marble palaces, just precision born from emptiness. You're in the company of horsemen who can hit a bird in flight while riding full gallop backward. And in the center of this moving city sits another kind of genius, though quieter than Alexander, the Mongol mind, that conquered from Korea to Kiev, then paused just long enough to pour tea. The scent reaches you first, not the floral sweetness you might expect, but something savory, milky, faintly salty, the perfume of sute tsai, Mongol milk tea. A pot simmers on an iron stove, steam curling like pale silk. The entire horde moves around it with reverence, as though the same men who could raise kingdoms have forgotten, for one fragile moment, what violence even is. You crouch near the pot, and an old rider nods for you to sit. "Drink," he says simply. The cup is rough ceramic, chipped at the rim. The tea inside tastes of boiled grass, butter, and smoke. Strange, earthy, comforting. The warmth spreads down your throat, dissolving the day's fatigue. You wonder how a drink could feel like a command to breathe. That's when you understand. This is their ceremony, their philosophy, the Mongol art of balance. Each movement is deliberate. When the host pours, he lifts the kettle high, letting the stream fall in a thin, shimmering arc. It's not just showmanship, it's aeration, softening the flavor. When guests receive their cups, they do so with both hands, bowing slightly. It's not subservience, it's synchronization. No one drinks until everyone has their portion. In this silence, you sense the same coordination that once made Mongol cavalry move as one unstoppable organism. A scholar later explains it to you. The discipline of tea mirrors the discipline of war. Every gesture rehearsed, every motion with purpose. You smile, thinking Alexander would have approved. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' calm rituals arose from necessity or philosophy. Some claim it was logistics. When your empire stretches across a continent, routine becomes survival. Others think it was spiritual, a counterweight to endless bloodshed. Maybe both. What's clear is that here, in this tiny pause between conquests, the Mongols found order in simplicity. You notice something else. Tea is not drunk for taste, but for timing. Before battle, it steadies the nerves. After, it soothes the ghosts. During negotiations, it bridges languages without a word spoken. The same warriors who could level cities with fire now sit, steaming cups in hand, their silence more eloquent than any speech. There's a quirky legend told among traders. Once, a visiting Persian merchant added sugar to his tea. The entire gear fell silent. The host frowned, set down his cup and said, "You sweeten milk, we sweeten victory." No one ever tried that again. You sip again, and the saltiness grows on you. It's the taste of endurance, something unromantic but vital. These people survive on open plains where weather kills faster than swords. Their rituals aren't decorations, they're anchors. As the pot empties, conversation begins. The topics shift easily from pastures to philosophy. A young warrior boasts about the distance of his bowshot. An old one counters with a proverb. An arrow flies far, but a word flies farther. Laughter ripples through the tent, low and genuine. You realize this harmony between ferocity and humor is their secret symmetry. You lean back and glance toward the horizon, where the campfires stretch like constellations across the steppe. The wind hums through the grass, and for a fleeting moment, you can think you can hear Alexander's echoes there. Another strategist who found geometry in motion. The Mongols, too, fight with vectors and timing, turning chaos into choreography. But unlike Alexander, they perfect withdrawal as much as advance.
When a Mongol army retreats, it does so intentionally, luring the enemy forward, collapsing like breath before the next exhale. That patience shows up even here in the tea ceremony, the deliberate cooling of the pot before the next pour. Everything is rhythm, inhalation, and release. A wandering monk seated beside you tells a story. Once, when Kublai Khan visited a Buddhist monastery, he refused to sit until tea was served. When asked why, he replied, "Only in stillness can the strong see themselves." You store that away, the line too elegant to lose. The scholar adds another tidbit, that tea leaves reached Mongolia through Chinese tribute routes, and the ritual itself became a cultural negotiation, a sign that even the fiercest warriors understood the diplomacy of cups. You find that image amusing, an empire run on horseback, yet held together by steam. Night deepens, and the tent quiets. The last cup is poured back into the pot, a gesture of gratitude, returning the drink to its source. You mimic it, feeling oddly moved. The host nods approvingly, as if you've passed some silent test. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying the scent of horses and frost. Somewhere, far away, drums beat faintly, announcing another campaign. But in this moment, all is still. The paradox becomes clear. To control the world, you must first control your breath. You smile into your empty cup. Conquerors may differ in language and weapon, but they share a hidden truth. Power without pause consumes itself. Alexander found geometry. The Mongols found equilibrium. Two philosophies, same purpose, mastery through motion and its absence. The host refills your cup one last time. The tea is lukewarm now, faintly metallic. He looks at you and says softly, "Even thunder must rest in clouds." You nod, letting the words sink into the quiet. The stars outside flicker like a battlefield viewed from eternity, tiny bursts of light in infinite dark. Somewhere, maybe, Alexander and Genghis Khan sit across from each other, steam rising between them, sharing the silence that only conquerors truly understand.
You wake to dawn the color of hammered silver. The steppe lies silent, dew clinging to the grass like breath held between worlds. The tea kettle from last night still sits by the embers, cold but upright, its handle darkened with soot. Somewhere far away, hooves echo across the earth, the eternal drumbeat of ambition, carried on by new generations who never met Alexander or Genghis, but live in their geometry and stillness all the same. You stretch, realizing the story has looped itself like a circle drawn in sand. Macedon to Mongolia, different ages, same art, control through calm. You start walking, and in your mind, the two worlds begin to overlap. Alexander's bronze phalanx marches beside Mongol horse archers. The smoke from their camps curls into the same sky. One drinks wine from silver, the other milk tea from clay. But both understand that mastery begins not with rage, but rhythm. You picture Alexander before a battle, eyes narrow, fingers tracing invisible lines in the dirt. You picture a Mongol general, crouched before a steaming pot, testing the water's patience before pouring. Both command silence before sound. Both turn chaos into choreography. Both understand that you win not when you shout loudest, but when the world bends naturally toward your stillness. Historians still argue whether Alexander could have defeated a Mongol army if time had allowed their meeting. It's a fun question for sleepless nights, though you suspect it misses the point. The battle would never have been fought on horseback or in armor. It would have been fought in tempo. Whoever broke rhythm first would lose. You can almost imagine the duel. Alexander would tilt the world like a chessboard, feigning weakness, waiting for the perfect gap. The Mongols would vanish into distance, circling, testing patience. Then, perhaps, between charges, they'd meet in a lull of dust and steam, both realizing the other plays the same game, dominance through delay. A whisper passes through your thoughts, Alexander's voice low and steady. Angles, not numbers. Then another, softer still. Even thunder must rest in clouds. You smile. Different centuries, same wisdom, delivered like an echo that's learned to change languages along the way.
You stop near a small rise and watch the horizon ripple. The sunlight paints everything gold. You think of how Alexander turned battlefields into geometry, and the Mongols turned emptiness into empire. One expanded outward, carving lines into maps. The other expanded inward, mastering pause and proportion. Together, they describe something bigger than conquest, a philosophy of balance. You sit, remembering the feel of the salt milk tea on your tongue and the sting of Gaugamela's dust in your throat. The tastes blur together now. Bitterness, sweetness, iron, smoke. The flavors of ambition and aftermath. You realize that both men, one the dreamer, one the storm, were chasing the same ghost. How to be infinite within a finite life. A fringe story you once heard resurfaces, the kind historians half ignore but poets never forget. They say that before Alexander died in Babylon, he asked to be buried with his hands outside the coffin, empty, to show that no man, no matter how vast his empire, carries anything beyond the horizon. And centuries later, when a Mongol Khan fell in battle, his horse was buried with him, its reins cut so that even in the next world he could never command what he could not control. Both gestures, in their strange symmetry, are confessions. Power is a mirage. Discipline, the only real possession. You breathe, slow, letting that truth settle. Around you, the wind has shifted again, softer now, tugging gently at the grass. You realize the story's tempo has changed. It's decrescendo, not drumbeat. The fire from last night's tea glows faintly, embers stubbornly alive. You pick up the kettle and pour the last of the lukewarm brew into the soil. Steam rises, thin as memory. Somewhere in that vapor, you imagine the silhouettes of both conquerors nodding, not in rivalry, but in recognition. Because genius, it turns out, isn't always about momentum or brilliance. Sometimes it's about restraint, the ability to stop, to listen, to hold the world in your palm without crushing it. Alexander did it with angles. The Mongols did it with rhythm. You can do it too, with silence. The steppe breathes with you. The echoes fade. And for the first time, you understand why both empires, despite all their thunder, left behind the same kind of hush. A hush that sounds less like absence and more like reverence.
The story slows now, sinking into the quiet hum that lingers after every storm. You can almost feel your heartbeat sinking with the rhythm of that distant plain, steady, deliberate, unhurried. The fire's gone to embers, but its warmth still brushes your hands. Around you, the world has softened. No armies, no echoes. Just the steady exhale of a planet too vast to remember every war, yet gentle enough to keep whispering their lessons. You think of Alexander again, not as a conqueror, but as a man kneeling over a map, tracing one last route that never got walked. And you think of the Mongol host gathering in silence around a pot of tea, letting the steam carry their weariness upward. Both knew something you're beginning to feel now, that genius and gentleness are sometimes the same motion, seen from opposite sides. So breathe a little slower. Imagine the horizon stretching infinitely in both directions, the grass bending but never breaking, the air cool and forgiving. The world's noise fades until all that remains is the faint rattle of your own thoughts settling into stillness. You've crossed deserts, battles, centuries tonight, all without moving an inch. And now the story asks you to do nothing but rest, to let the last images dissolve like steam into dawn. The kettle cools, the sky lightens, the world exhales. Good night, traveler. May your dreams find their own quiet geometry.